Good day. It's still November 2nd, 2025. Second video of the day. I wanted to go over the crop plan for the 2026 season. Haven't done a video like this in a little bit, so it'll be beneficial to me and it could be beneficial to you. So let's get into it a little bit. After the garlic is all harvested, there will be 11 beds for planting. I like to start my seedlings in soil blocks, and I used to use Vermont compost. I switched to Coast of Maine, and they have a really nice blend. And now that I'm out here in Nevada trying to use stuff local, or at least regionally local, luckily these folks are right down in Carson City, so came up with a blend. I didn't come up with it, but I talked to one of the folks who worked there, and they suggested that they don't recommend to use theirs for soil blocks, but people have. So he gave me the blend that I could use. So we're using 70% kick and 30% soar mix to make those soil blocks, and might I say they come out premium. So all of the seedlings that you are about to hear off here, besides the carrots and the pumpkins, will all be started in soil blocks at their according times. So going based off of last year's record, I don't know if it was just because it was a drought season, kind of abnormally drier, not a lot of snowpack in the mountains, abnormally more dry than it usually is, not a lot of snowpack in the mountains. So maybe in a higher moisture year, the garlic will take longer to harvest. I think maybe because there was a lack of moisture. Although, like, all of the garlic still did head up to, most of the garlic still did head up to really good sizes. Usually when you have a smaller head of garlic, that means there wasn't enough moisture. So, and I was only watering on an average of 2, maybe 3 times in a week. As it gets more into the winter and we get more rain, if it rains in a week, I'm not going to go water. It just seems unnecessary. So if we have a higher moisture winter, higher snowpack in the mountains, more moisture in the valley, then this could be completely different, because I have, going based off of this season, everything was harvested from anywhere from June 16th to June 21st. So it took us about a week to harvest everything. That's usually how it goes. As we scale up, it's obviously going to take longer, but you usually harvest one bed and see how they look. Okay, and then as the date, it's like shortly, everything's ready. So it's just time to get it all. So if we can get it harvested in that same time frame, then we can start our seedlings that are going to take the place of the garlic accordingly. So potatoes, you just plant in the ground. You can plant potatoes at any time in the season. You can either do spring potatoes, you can do late season potatoes, or mid-season potatoes. You know, if you plant in April, you'll have them by July. If you plant in June or July, you'll have them in October or September. So it also just depends on if they're early, mid-season, or late-season variety of potato. Mid-season take about 90 days. Short season are a little bit shorter than that, and obviously late season are a little bit longer than that. So first bed will be planted with early season potatoes, because they'll finish up in about 80 days to 90 days from, so they won't be storage potatoes, but they'll be new potatoes. And that would be July, August, so early September. So early enough to, I could just let them go. If you harvest the potatoes early, they just don't have a developed skin, so that's why they're called new potatoes. But if you let them cure in the soil, then that's how they get that hard skin and become winter storage potatoes. Caribe, I know, is like just a good early season variety, and that's one that I've grown before. So it has a softer skin. It's not really good for winter storage, as to where like a Yukon Gold potato is a later season and it's going to have a harder skin on it. So the varieties that I've picked for potato are the Caribe, and I can't even pronounce it and I don't want to butcher it. So it's this unique red potato, and they're growing it over at Wood Prairie Family Farm. So we'll be getting seed potato from there for this coming season. And then after the potatoes come out, you can get a third crop out of that bed, direct sowing some lettuce and mustard greens. Put the cover on it, and that will give it enough time to maturate and get a harvest off of it before it gets too cold. And yeah, so then I have my varieties of lettuce picked out: Roxy, Black Seed Simsim, and potentially a Winter Density. And then we can do, for mustard greens, there's the Red Giant, which I love, the Green Wave, and then the Golden Frills. So moving on to bed 2, Swiss chard. So like I said, potatoes we can just plant in the ground right when the garlic comes out. Just make sure that we keep them watered, and they should do just fine. Excessive amounts of water, because we're hand watering, there's no irrigation, and at that point in the season, June 16th, that's going into peak summer, so it's just so hot right then, and if you don't give it enough moisture, they really are going to take a long time to germinate, or not germinate at all. So bed 2 is going to be Swiss chard, and I have a whole bunch of different varieties of Swiss chard that are picked out, and I've been planning this for, in my head at least, for a few years, and wanting to make this happen. So I'm not going to let those varieties out the vault yet, so just let that be a surprise. But Swiss chard needs to be started 3 to 4 weeks before it goes outdoors, so start those at the end of May, beginning of June. The good thing is that when you start seedlings at that time, it's warming up pretty quickly. So sorry. Hello, sorry about that. Buckley, hey, quiet. So 3 to 4 weeks before the time that you're supposed to plant it out, which would be early June, last week in May. And that's a good time to start seeds because it's not too cold. As to where when you're starting in February, March, and April, and even early May, it can still be pretty cold out there and things take a long time to germinate and grow. So it's almost better to just kind of wait until the temperatures are a little bit more stabilized, and you'll have a little bit more steady growth with your seedlings. So row 3 will be determinate tomatoes, and I would like to undersow with carrots. So the varieties that I have picked out for the determinate tomatoes so far are Mountain Princess and Roma VF Paste. And then the carrots that I am going to do are Bolin and Dragon Carrot. All open pollinated varieties. I prefer not to sow hybrids. That way, if we choose to, we can save the seed. If you save seed off an open pollinated variety, you'll get that same variety back, sometimes maybe with a little diversity. But if you save seed from a hybrid, you're going to get one of that plant that you save seed from the hybrid, you're going to get one of its parents. So you won't get an exact replica. And it'll take like 7 to 10 years to restabilize the hybrid. So we're not trying to do that. Maybe we'll create some of our own hybrids in the future, but right now we're just focusing on open pollinated. So that's actually going to be beds 3 and 4. So it might be good on me to do 4 different varieties of determinate tomatoes and 4 different varieties of carrots, or we could just keep it simple and do 2 and 2 with 1 bed and 1 bed. So, and just to give you the kind of grand scheme of things, it's everybody works with each other here. So the potatoes are going to grow up and they're going to cast shade to it'd be better if I was just showing you this, but this is one of those like me sit in front of the camera and talk videos. But we'll show you. If you just go back and look at the video before this, you can see all the beds and you'll understand what I'm saying. So to the south side of the property, there is the first bed, which will have potatoes in it. The rising sun comes up, that's going to cast shade. The early sun is from the potatoes will cast shade onto the Swiss chard that's starting to get established. And then so beds 3 and 4, the tomatoes are going to grow up kind of tall, so in the afternoon sun, those tomatoes are actually going to also cast shade onto the Swiss chard. And then undersowing the determinate tomatoes with the carrots, that's going to give shade for the carrots to germinate, because it's really hard to get carrots to germinate at that time in the season, and you need to keep the soil moist for like a week straight. So then we move over to bed 5 and we have sweet potato slips. So once the sun is at like midday, kind of like where it's at now, but it'll be in the summertime, that's going to be like beaming right down on the middle of the garden. So once those tomatoes grow up a little bit, because what we've realized from this past season is that sweet potato slips need shade to establish in Nevada, from my own experience, or they need to be in a raised bed on a tree's edge, or just shade cloth. Who knows? We'll learn more as we continue to experiment through the years, but based off of what I've learned this previous season, they need shade to establish. So when the sun's beaming down on the garden midday and those determinate tomatoes and carrots grow up, that's going to cast shade onto the sweet potato slips to let them establish. Then row 6 is another row of Swiss chard. Those will grow up tall and then cast shade onto the sweet potato slips from the other side. Then beds 7, 8, and 9 are going to be my New England, I don't want to say mine, but it's from my own save seed. This is hundreds of years old heirloom variety, the New England pie pumpkin that I've been saving seed from since 2021. So All of those 3 beds, 7, 8, and 9, will be from all of my own saved seed. Pretty proud of that. And the fact that it's been brought 3,000 miles across the country and now is being adapted to another climate. A lot of these heirlooms are widely adapted to North America, but it's still pretty cool to see. That's a whole nother tangent we could go down, but I'm not going to go there. So New England Pie Pumpkin beds 7, 8, and 9, that will ultimately create shade for beds 10 and 11, which will be Hamburg parsley, which is a root. Shout out to our ancestors. That is my partner Michelle's ethnicity. She is Swedish, so looked up if there was a Swedish variety of parsley, and in Sweden it turns out that they grow Hamburg parsley, which is a root, and it'll be fun to experiment around with that. And then I will be growing Hungarian parsley for my Hungarian background. I am also Italian and British and Irish, so figure that mix out. That's why I got the little orange rocking in my beard right here. But and then to ultimately end it off on bed 11 with Tulsi basil, holy basil. I'm sorry. Tulsi basil, I was going to do 2 varieties of holy basil. There's like 4 different varieties of Tulsi. But I want to do some sacred basil and then Rutgers downy mildew resistant devotion Genovese basil. So I have some basil for making pestos, and then basil for some medicinal herbal teas. That's a lot in a nutshell, and it's a lot to think about, but that's why we need to start thinking about it now in November. Figure out all the varieties that you would like to select for your crop plan. Figure out how much money it's going to cost to get all the seeds that you're going to need to plant throughout the season. Then you're going to need to get your soil mix. Figure out how much you're going to need to sustain all the seedlings that you need to grow. And then you need to get your timings right, because if we don't have all these transplants started at their own individual times and lined up, I forgot to continue that pattern. I pretty much stopped it at the Swiss chard, but the determinate tomatoes, they can start flowering at the 6-week point. So, they need to be started at least 4 to 5 weeks before you put them in the ground, and they also need to be hardened off. Carrots, like I said, they take a week to germinate. Sweet potato slips, we start those in January, and we will not be planting those until the 3rd week of June. We sprout the potato and the windowsill at the beginning of the new year. Starts to sprout little sproutlets in like a month, and then from March all the way until July, that thing is pumping out sweet potato slips. I've done this 5 years in a row. It's an amazing way if you want to grow sweet potato slips and don't have the funds to buy slips in for your farm. Go buy an organic sweet potato, sprout it in your windowsill. Just need to make sure that it was grown in the same hemisphere as you, because if you get it from the southern hemisphere, it won't sprout. So New England pie pumpkins, we're not starting those. I just like to direct sow those. And parsley, that needs to get started pretty early on. February. I've seen January, but I think that's just a little bit too early. Maybe February is still pushing it, and then definitely March. But it just takes a really long time to get going. And then I don't know about holy basil exactly. Got to do some more research on that, but I would infer that it's about 4 to 6 weeks before you want to plant it, just like regular basil. So yeah, not only do you need to make sure that you got all the money for your seedlings and your soil mix, and figure out how many seeds you're going to need to fill all your beds. You got to have your soil mix secured and make sure you have enough of that. And then on top of all that, make sure you have your timing down, so that when all this garlic comes in the ground, we can get plants with living roots right in their holes, water them in really deeply, put a nice fresh layer of mulch on, and we're hitting the ground running to the back half of the season. And there wasn't a blip. There was basically the time that there was a plant out of the ground was when we pulled the garlic, and then, you know, put the plant right back in that hole. So that's the name of the game of intensive farming. You want to make sure you have living roots in the ground as long and as much as possible, and if not, then we're cutting those roots at the top and leaving the root system in the ground to decompose, carbon sequestering, and if we don't have living roots in the mound, then we have at least like 6 to 8 inches of a thick, heavy, biodiverse mulch of local wood chips, leaves, and whatever else we can get our hands on. So that's another long 20-minute video for you, but it's helpful for me. Like, even if nobody was to ever watch these videos, it's a good notebook per se that I can go back on and be like, hey, what was I ranting, raving, talk about that day? But or just see how blue the sky was on this day, and be looking at this video a year from now and be like, oh wow, it's raining on this day. Little things like that. But I do have my paper notes right here. That's everything that I was just reading off of. And thank you for listening. So peace, blessings, and wholeness. Thank you for your support, and we will see you on the next one.